today we are continuing to read in the letter of 2 Timothy. We're in chapter 2 today. Now, just to remind you a little bit of background on this letter. This is Paul's last letter that he writes. And since he wrote 1 Timothy, his situation has changed drastically and honestly for the worse. Paul is once again imprisoned, and he is in the middle of his court trial that Paul is pretty certain is going to end in his execution. So he's writing to Timothy as the one who is going to continue and to take on the missionary work that Paul has started. In chapter 1 of this letter that we read yesterday, Paul appeals to Timothy to continue in the preaching of the gospel as he has learned from him, as he has learned from Paul. Now, Paul says that this won't be free from challenges, and he reminds Timothy that it is through God's power that we all persevere through such challenges. Now, in chapter 2 today, Paul once again encourages Timothy to be strong in the grace of Jesus. This is a reminder to Timothy, but also a reminder to us that God's grace not only saves us from sin and restores our relationship with God, but it also empowers us to live out our lives here on earth, all for the glory of God. It is through God's grace that Paul reminds Timothy that you can continue to preach the gospel. And then Paul gives Timothy these instructions starting in verse 2. You have heard me teach things that have been confirmed by many reliable witnesses. Now teach these truths to other trustworthy people who will be able to pass them on to others. Now you may have heard the word discipleship before. It's kind of a church word. Well, it is a church word that we use. But what it means is what Paul is writing here. Discipleship is the process by which people become disciples of Jesus. And that means to show and tell people about what it means to follow Jesus, invite them along that journey, and then empower them to go out and do the same thing, to show and tell others about what it means to follow Jesus. So, Paul then goes on to talk about the ideal character of the person who follows Jesus, and he does this by giving us 3 different images. Now, as I read these next verses, try to pick out those images. We're going to start in verse 3. Endure suffering along with me as a good soldier of Christ Jesus. Soldiers don't get tied up in the affairs of civilian life, for then they cannot please the officer who enlisted them. And athletes cannot win the prize unless they follow the rules. And hard-working farmers should be the first to enjoy the fruit of their labor. So, what are those images? We saw the image of a soldier, of an athlete, and a farmer. And all of those mean something. As a soldier, Paul says, be single-minded in your desire to follow Jesus. As an athlete, he says, obey God's rules in order to succeed. And then as a farmer, put in the hard work. Now, all of these people in these positions must discipline themselves and be willing to sacrifice to achieve the results they want. As followers of Jesus, our desire should be to live for Him and to share His good news with others while here on this earth, with the eventual hope to live eternally with Him. That's the goal in mind. The faith of someone who follows Jesus is not meant to be accidental or casual. It requires sacrifice and discipline, just as those 3 images that Paul gives us show. It is not free from challenge, as Paul goes on to say, and as evidenced by Paul's current situation, how he's in prison. However, Paul quotes what was probably an early Christian hymn and tells us of God's promises to those who do take this seriously, who do sacrifice, who do follow Jesus wholeheartedly. And we're going to start in verse 11. Let me turn the page here. Paul says, this is a trustworthy saying. If we die with Him, we will also live with Him. If we endure hardship, we will reign with Him. If we deny Him, He will deny us. If we are unfaithful, He remains faithful, for He cannot deny who He is. So the invitation for us today is to live all out following Jesus. Just as Paul was instructing Timothy on how to continue to follow Jesus and spread his gospel, Paul's words to us are a reminder to remain steadfast in our pursuit of Jesus. It is only then that we will experience the hope, the peace, the grace, the love, and the life that comes from living our lives step in step with God. And there's no greater place to be.
If these devotional videos are helpful to you, subscribe to our channel and click the notification button so you know when we post a new video. And of course, please share them with others.